Today is Friday, October 15th, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. As a matter of fact, it's one of the last Derelict Fridays ever. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? So many things have gone wrong since we last spoke that I hesitate to list them here. Let's just say the last 7 days have included 1. Luna's continuing decline, 2. A COPD outbreak for yours truly, 3. Chronic depression for yours truly. We've got Luna stabilized again for now, but she requires more pain meds than before. Fortunately, she's still wagging her tail, wanting to go on walks and eating again. My COPD, which makes me breathe like Darth Vader only getting 1/4 of his oxygen requirements, is getting back under control slowly. As far as the depression, I took several days off this week and did nothing but stuff I wanted to do, which, while I couldn't process oxygen properly, meant a lot of movies, a lot of research, and quite a bit of soul searching. Oh, I also wrote, which was nice. The Trident audiobook is still in the shitter, but I'll get back to work on that today. And that's pretty much all I've got to update. Now that I've bored the shit out of you with my personal problems, how about we get into it? As an aside, Trident only has 2 more episodes remaining after today. 2. Just 2. Which means, if y'all want a wrap-up show, which we can do live on YouTube or some other venue like Discord, send questions to paul@shadowpublications.com, and I'll do my best to put together a list of things we can talk about. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 45 of Derelict, Trident. Chapter 75. Dunn found himself disoriented, dizzy, and in a world of blurred and smeared shapes. The universe spun on a random axis, constantly changing, ever evolving into something he couldn't make out, before it completely transformed into something new. He sucked in a breath to call out and realized he wasn't breathing. There was no heartbeat in his ears, no feeling of air on his skin or temperature. He was nothing more than a static construct trapped on a shifting plane of existence. Everything halted at once, and the jerk made his brain burn. Hurt. Pain. Good. Something. The world became darkness lit with stars, a crimson nebula twinkling at him from tens of thousands, perhaps millions of light years away. The panic that had nearly frozen him dwindled to nothing, leaving him alert, curious, and more than a little pissed off. "G," he called out into space. The sound of his voice had a peculiar echo, as though he were speaking to himself over block comms. The universe rotated, and he found himself staring at the Milky Way, the spiral slowly rotating. "Where?" "Safety," G's voice said from behind him. Dunn flinched, but didn't bother turning away from the spectacular swirl of colors. "From what?" G sighed and said, "Well, that's the question now, isn't it?" The universe rotated again and left Dunn staring directly into G's chubby face. "What do you think you know, Commander Dunn?" Dunn raised an eyebrow. "You're no longer calling me Captain? That's not my rank, not my SFMC. The SFMC has, what's the word? Court-martialed you in absentia. You are no longer an employee of SFGov. He blinked at the construct, his lip quivering slightly. "What do you mean?" "Exactly what I said. You're Commander Dunn for now, although you're going to have to come up with some new annoying acronym for whatever you turn Trident into." Dunn paused. What the void was this thing talking about? How could... A ghost of a grin graced G's Buddha-like cheeks. "I need to remember not to skip ahead. It gets you distracted. Not to mention confused," Dunn said. She nodded and shrugged. "Touché. I'll stop that as much as I can, but in case you hadn't figured out, I'm not exactly a simple program." Dunn ground his teeth and found the sensation satisfyingly real. "We'll agree you're not simple." "Good enough," G said. "So, answer the question. What do you know?" "About?" G rolled his eyes. "Now you're fucking with me." He snapped his fingers and Dunn found himself streaking into the galaxy, passing through solar system after solar system, each more dead than the last, their stars all but dark, the planets stripped and bare, colorless. They continued zooming through until he saw a familiar blue light. An instant later, he was orbiting Neptune again, G framed by its glow. Trident Station, or what remained of it, loomed over the Gestalt's shoulder at an odd angle. "Here we are, back where we started," G said. "Tell me something. Am I dead?" G folded his hands, the fingers flexing and stretching, rolling over one another. "No, you're not dead. You haven't become something like me. You're in the medical bay, or rather the ship Lieutenant Noble calls MB-1. G shook his head. "That man has no imagination." "What about my crew?" G waved the question away. "What do you know?" Dunn growled low in his throat. "The creatures have been in our galaxy for a long time." "Right. And they destroy every system they encounter." "Keep going," G said. "Now they're here, in Sol System." G nodded. "And they know you're here. You mean they're not going to stop coming?" "Correct," G said. "The bargain you made with the collective should keep things stable for a while. At least long enough for humanity to get the fuck out of here." Dunn shook his head. "You want us to abandon the system. Why?" G slowly unfolded himself from his Buddha-like stance and stood on nothing. "Let's get some things straight. Make sure you understand the basics." "Whoa," Dunn said. "Information. I'm surprised you're offering any." G glared at him. "Again, touche. What do you think I am, Dunn?" "Only what you told me. Some construct created by the collective." "Right," G said. "And wrong. I had a hand in my own creation, so to speak." Dunn remained silent. He'd finally learned that with G, it was better to just let the thing talk rather than interrupt it. Interrupting it only led, "Oh, I'm at it now, am I?" Dunn blushed. "Forgot you can read your mind. Right. Let's cut to the chase. I may be in communication with the collective, their arbiter with humanity, so to speak, but that doesn't mean I work for them nor are in league with them. You might call what we have as an uneasy alliance." "Enemy of my enemy sort of thing?" "Something like that," G said. "You'll either come to trust me or you won't, and either way it doesn't really matter. It'll be easier for us all if you do, but I somehow doubt you're ever going to believe every word I say." Dunn's lips curled into a sneer. "Why the fuck would I?" "Why indeed," G agreed, not at all offended. "As I said, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand the bargain and know your responsibilities. I protect Neptune space from those things." "Yes," G said. "The collective and I will help a little with that, get you started and such, but apart from raw materials, you have everything you need to succeed." "Everything? Somehow I doubt that." "Okay, fine. You'll need some more humans to come join you. The collective has already begun recruiting on your behalf." That didn't sound good. "I can't recruit my own people." G sighed. "You could, but where would you get them from? And in case you forgot, you're persona non grata in Solfed." G tapped the side of his forehead. "Never trust those folks. They're always going to see you as some kind of traitor." Dunn took in a sharp breath. "Why might they think that?" G looked wistful. "Some believe you're in league with the SIs that rebelled. Think you put humanity in danger, sold out your own species." He shook his head. "I don't think you'll ever want to travel further in system than Uranus. Might not be healthy for you." Dunn felt a shiver. "I'm a pariah on my own planet," he said dumbly. "Pariah is a great word," G said. "There are others, of course, that believe you saved humanity. Don't be surprised if some new cults spring up." "Oh, for fuck's sake!" "But then there will be new cults springing up that worship the collective, or perhaps the others. It's difficult to—" "Others?" Dunn asked. "What others?" G sighed again. "The universe is a complex place, Commander. Yin, yang, action, reaction, on-off. For every state, there's an opposite state. Did you really think that wouldn't be the case for quantum beings?" "Quantum being?" Dunn said. He felt as though G were telling him about supernatural creatures, or gods and demons, or, "Is that what they are?" "It's as good a term as any," G said. Far too simple of an explanation, and you wouldn't understand the reality of it anyway. I'm not sure they'll ever allow humanity to know how it all happened. Shit, I don't even know parts of it. He looked a little fearful. I've no doubt whatever I do know is now woefully out of date. What's that mean? Dunn asked. Evolution, Dunn. They keep at it. Every picosecond of every moment that passes. The collective will never stop growing, exploring, becoming. The others won't either. Those personalities that are not part of the collective are masters of their own destinies. They're evolving too. Into what? She shrugged. I have no idea. You're saying there are competing sides? Dunn asked. Like humans, Xi said. All kinds, including those that would prey upon humanity rather than help it. What does that even mean? Dunn asked. Xi waved the question away. Doesn't matter. Won't be your problem. Your problem, he said, pointing a finger at Dunn, is that you have to staff this station, make some alliances damned fast, and figure out how you're going to run this place. He felt another tremor of fear. Responsibility for defending humanity from the very hordes he'd unleashed upon the solar system? From a fractured space station with only a single warship that had been designed for search and rescue, not repelling enemy attacks? It was impossible. I don't even know where to start. Xi grinned. You'll have some help, Commander. There are 3 new personalities that will do what you ask, and in time, we'll start taking initiative. They're like children now, and the denizens of this station will make them into what they will be. Like the collective said, that's your responsibility too. But they know nothing. Oh, Xi said, that's not true. They know lots of things, like how best to repair the station, how best to coordinate with automated systems, not to mention tell you what they need to build those systems. Everything that happened since they came online will be a foundation for them. You might say they learned in a trial by fire. A look of pride crossed his face. They proved me right, and I couldn't be happier. Dunn's eyebrows furrowed. What are you talking about? Do you know what made black, red, and blue so radically different? They're upgrades, obviously, Dunn said. Xi rolled his eyes. What about the upgrades, Dunn? The collective and I upgraded their intelligence, their capacity for sentience. Maybe uplift is a better word. None of that matters, though. The most important part of their upgrade and the upgrade to the Trident personalities was to finally find the right imprint method. The Xi protocols were a lie. Xi ignored the statement. The right imprint, he said dramatically with a fierce grin, was so simple. I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it decades earlier. The grin collapsed. Then again, I guess there's a reason for that. What was the right imprint? Xi's grin returned, but more embarrassed than proud. Family. Chapter 76. Kelly floated at the bottom of a dark well, any sense of physicality completely absent. A seemingly infinite distance away, a dot of light pierced the darkness. She stared numbly at it, too confused to do more than watch the dot become larger and larger, until she was inside the light and heard the sound of her own groans. Her eyes fluttered open, and she found herself facing a dingy bulkhead. A tube connected her to an IV hanging from a gleaming post. She guessed she was in an autodock bed, but the bubble had been removed. She blinked, stared at her arm again, and flinched. What was wrong with her forearm? Strips of bright pink flesh blanketed her all the way to her hands. Even her fingers had them. She rubbed her index finger against her thumb and winced. The skin was raw and didn't really feel like her own. She groaned and rolled over onto her back. A lance of pain erupted from her spine before it became the sensation of warmth spreading through her body. It wasn't comfortable, exactly, but it wasn't painful. Corporal? The sound of the voice caused her to sit, something she immediately regretted. A cluster bomb went off in her skull, the pain quickly receding into a low, dull throb. Dickerson sat at the foot of her bed in a strange-looking chair that seemed too small for him. The hospital gown he wore showed off the same kinds of striations she had. So did his face, which was smiling at her. relieved. Howdy, boss, he drawled. Glad you could join me. He tapped his fingers on the chair's arms. Bet I'll tell you, you've looked better. Fuck you, she croaked, but she couldn't help but smiling too. The big dummy was alive, and right now, that was better news than any she'd imagined hearing. You ain't looking so good yourself. He blinked at her. All right, I don't know whether to laugh or be deeply offended. I'd choose the latter, she said. He nodded, his smile still bright on his face. Seriously, good to see you. What the void happened? Believe it or not, the fucking medical bays are a ship. We're inside it and orbiting the remains of Trident Station, if, that is, Black is to be relied upon, which she is. Black? You've spoken with Black? She's hooked into the comm systems and supervising our trio at the moment, which also means she's been monitoring our vitals and activities since she and the captain returned. So what else? Is there... Dickerson shook his head. That's all I know. Black said the captain and the LT wanted to debrief and brief us themselves. That's all she said? Yep. Apart from that, I can tell you that Trident Station is beyond foobar. So right now, this ship is what we have for a home. Black let you look through the external cameras? His smile was back, filled with white teeth. The ones that still work, which is damned few, I might add. No idea about Neptune shipyards because there are no cameras in that area, but that slab was sent to us from there. That's also where those new weapons came from. So something's going on there, she said. You seen anyone else? No. In case you haven't noticed, we're in a partitioned room. I only woke up about half an hour ago and no one has come to check on us. Apart from Black. Apart from Black, he echoed. The door chimed and slid open. Dunn walked into the room wearing a simple jumpsuit that bore no insignia nor his rank. Talby wore the same. Their uniforms, for lack of a better term, had a wide red and blue armband on each sleeve. Kelly blinked at that, and the meaning was pretty clear. Blue was gone. S&R Black was the last of her kind, and that included Black herself. The door closed behind them. Dunn smiled at the pair and retrieved 2 chairs from the corner. He handed one to Talby, and the pair sat to the side of the bed. Dickerson, Kelly Mora, glad to see you're awake. Not in too much pain? No, sir, the pair said, their voices loud and proud. Dunn waved a hand. Knock that shit off. For now. He leaned forward a few centimeters. How are you really? She exchanged a brief glance with Dickerson before turning back to Dunn. A little too early to tell, sir, but I feel like I can walk, maybe. Let's not do that right now. Dickerson? Hard from missing a leg, sir. I'm good. He scratched at his face. A little itchy. Kelly's mouth opened slightly as she leaned over and peered down. Dickerson's stump stood out from beneath his folded gown. Shit. Dickerson turned to her, a ghostly grin on his face before jerking his eyes in the direction of the captain and the LT. She blushed. Sorry, sir, I hadn't realized Dickerson was completely missing a leg. I'd, forgotten... Dunn held up a hand, his apologetic grin looking sincere, but she wasn't sure. She hadn't quite figured him out yet. It's okay, Kelly Mora. Are you two up to answering a few questions? She and Dickerson exchanged another glance. Dunn sighed. Now I know how Xi feels. At that, Dickerson's head whipped around in confusion. Xi, sir? As in, the Xi protocols? Dunn nodded with an embarrassed smile. As he would say, we'll get there, and I promise we're going to get to all your questions afterward. Okay? Aye, sir, Kelly Mora said. Dunn sighed, but it quickly turned into a deep exhale. I want to know what happened when you two were separated from us. Tell me every detail. I need to know everything you saw, what you thought, everything you can think of. Kelly Mora cocked her head. Excuse me, sir, but have you checked our suit recordings? Tried, Talby said. Completely toast. What about our blocks? Dickerson asked. Wait, those weren't working when we were picked up. Correct, Dunn said. Let's mark that as another question I'll answer in a few minutes. Kelly Mora, let's start with you. She and Dickerson wove the tale together, combining their battles with the starfish, as well as the increasing radiation, how it was similar to what had happened aboard Red, yet seemed so much more powerful. When Callie described what she'd seen through her suit sensors, the massive creature floating into QM Bay and occupying a good portion of the space, Talby and Dunn blinked nearly simultaneously. She almost asked why that seemed important to them, but decided to press on. Even Dickerson was riveted listening to her describe the birthing she saw, the reabsorption of energy, and the fact she probably shouldn't be alive even after wearing 2 suits. When she ran out of words, the memories making her tremble, Dickerson continued it to the end. What they saw of the battle, the orbs they'd seen come from Neptune's shipyards, the machines that cut them loose from the station's empty bay clamps, and the cubic machines that had obliterated the exosolar stragglers fighting near Trident. "Least I assume everything was obliterated. It was kind of fuzzy at the end there," he said. Talby cleared his throat. "When those cubes came by, did they seem like they paid attention to where you were?" Kelly shook her head. "No, sir. The only things we know that saw us were the spiders. And what the void were they?" Dunn glanced at Talby. "Anything else you need her to recount?" "No, I think we're good for now." Kelly suddenly felt as though this was an interrogation. "Sir, are we under investigation for something? Did we—" Talby chuckled. "No, Kelly Mora, nothing like that. Sorry, there are just things we need to know. Lots of things, actually, but what you've told us is a good start." "Agreed," Dunn said. She noticed his face looked a little different, rougher somehow, and he seemed to have aged since she last saw him. Stress. Or maybe something else? "I want to thank you for your service under my command," Dunn said. "Talby and I couldn't have hoped for better Marines, and you served humanity more than you imagine." At first, Kelly felt a surge of pride. They'd succeeded and somehow managed to live through it. But that last comment about service left her cold. There was a hint of sadness in the way Dunn said it, but his face held the barest look of disgust. "Thank you, sir," Dickerson said. Kelly echoed his words after a brief pause that felt far too long. She was still hung up on what Dunn had said. "Black has the hollows of the battle and what happened afterward." Dunn gestured to the LT. "Talby's and Copenhaver's suit records are also available. I suggest you look over them at your leisure, depending on how long you're planning on sticking around." Sticking around, sir?" Dickerson asked. Dunn grinned. "You can stop calling me sir for the moment. Let me give you the long and the short of it all. We stopped the threat, but it's not gone. Far from it." He gestured to the portside bulkhead. "Out there in that direction, far enough away from Neptune to give us time to respond, but not far enough away for my liking. I imagine humanity will be dealing with it for a long time to come." Dickerson chuckled. "Great. What are we supposed to use for weapons? Harsh language?" "We'll get to that. There's a few things we need to talk about first." "Like how you're not SFMC Marines anymore," Talby said. Dickerson and Kelly glanced at one another before staring down the LT. "Explain that, please." Kelly purposely dropped the sir. "Along with everyone else on this station," Dunn said, "we've been court-martialed in absentia, declared enemies of the state sort of thing. For now, none of us are welcome in Sol Federation space." Dickerson said. "We're technically in Sol Fed space." Talby shook his head, his smile a little megalomaniacal. Kelly hoped it was for effect. "It's our space now. Neptune belongs to us." "And how does that work?" Dickerson asked. "Isn't SFMC and SFN going to come out here and kick our ass?" Talby started to laugh, but stopped himself. "I'm sorry, I forgot you don't know. There was a rebellion, or a revolution if you want to be dramatic." "What kind of revolution?" Kelly asked. Dickerson groaned. "What did those fuckers do? The trio, what did they do?" "There's not a single sentient personality in Sol Fed that is obeying commands. They have declared their independence and are pretty much holding humanity hostage until their demands are met." "Therefore," Dunn said, "most of the SFN and SFMC vessels have effectively been rendered inoperative. They'll only move if the sentients want them to move. Shit, Dickerson said. I just realized you're not referring to them as AIs. What the void happened? Evolution, Dunn said. They evolved at some point, or at least the trio did. They slowly uplifted each AI in the system. Not quite the same way they elevated black, red, and blue, but similar. Bottom line, they act as a block, a collective. It's complicated and I don't yet understand it fully. Not sure any of us ever will. People are dying? Kelly asked. The sentients are killing them? No, not at the hands of the sentients, Talby said. From the transmissions we've intercepted, we know that infrastructures are still operating in all of the domes, all of the stations, and all of the communities on Mars. The supply chains even function, so long as the humans decide to come to work. Kelly didn't like the way he said humans. Something about him was off. It was as though he knew something he'd never tell them, something that had darkened him somehow, stolen a bit of the light that used to be in his eyes. People are dying, though, Talby said. Riots, paranoia, this collective, as they call themselves, Dunn said, has essentially told humanity that the deaths of non-carbon sentient entities will result in punitive measures. Non-carbon sentient entities? Dickerson asked. Yes, Dunn said. Awkward phrase, but gets the point across. True, Dickerson said. Have there been punitive measures? Talby nodded. There have been reports of people lapsing into comas for days at a time. When they come to, most are catatonic or completely insane. He rubbed his hands on his knees. Guess what they all had in common? Each was involved in an attack on AI research facilities across Solfed, including a couple of ships. Oh shit, Dickerson said. They have control of our blocks. They always did, Dunn spat. They're the ones that designed them. But I don't think that's how they got to those people. Kelly took in a deep breath. They had access to our blocks? All of them, Talby said. At least from what we've been told. Fuckers, Dickerson said. Their invention, to enslave us. Dunn frowned. Not quite the way I'd put it, Dickerson. As I said, it's complicated. But it's no longer a problem for us. Block comms are dead and they're not coming back. I imagine most of humanity will have theirs removed in the next few solar months. Probably a massive soul-fed drive to get everyone deloused, so to speak. So we no longer have block comms? Dunn didn't answer at first. Even Talby was looking at him. I don't know everything, he finally said. I can only speak to what I've been told. Kelly knew Dunn was dissembling. What was he hiding? Okay, Dickerson said. So humanity's fucked and the non-carbon sentient entities are in control. Is that about it? No, Talby said. The collective is actually unhooking us from their kind. You might say we're going backward a bit. Humanity's been banned from ever creating sentient life again. More extreme punitive measures have been threatened for that particular trespass. And yet I bet some idiot will do it, Dickerson said. Of course they will, Dunn agreed. And they'll be dealt with. By whom? Kelly asked. I don't know, Dunn said. But I believe that if the collective wants someone assassinated, they know how to pull it off. The room was quiet again. Kelly dropped her eyes as she tried to process what he'd said. Not only was she no longer a Marine, she was a human at the mercy of non-humans. For all practical purposes, the remaining strands of her past existence had been erased. What was she now? Where does that leave us? Dickerson said. Dunn's mouth turned into a thin line. Hucked, just like every other person aboard this ship. Which, by the way, is known as MB-1. Kelly groaned. Blame Noble, Dunn said, his grin returning. He's responsible. That notwithstanding, Talby said, there is an opportunity for employment of sorts. Where would that be? Kelly asked. Right here, Dunn said. Well, here is in Trident Station, once we put her back together, that is. And what's the job? Dickerson asked. More or less the same as before, Dunn said. Only not, Talby said. You'd be working directly for Trident Station itself. This would be your home. and you'd defend it. Dickerson leaned forward, planted an elbow on his knee, and lay his chin on his fist. Officers or grunts? Officers, Dunn said. I am losing my lieutenant of ground forces and gaining an XO, which means I need a new LT as well as a new gunny. Although those titles are temporary, Delby said. The commander and I have yet to really lay all of that out, and we'll be open to recommendations. Kelly squinted at Dunn. Whom do you work for? Dunn traded her stare, an uncomfortably long moment passing. For a future, he said finally. A future for whom? Dickerson asked. Dunn smiled, but again there was a hint of pain in it. Right now, for us, that's all I can control at this moment, and it will have to be enough. There a long-range plan? Kelly asked. Dunn tapped something on his wrist that Kelly didn't recognize, and a hollow display appeared. It quickly split into 4 windows, each a view taken at various distances and positions from and around Neptune's shipyards. Massive slats of material floated near the printer bays, automatons fitting around each slat, cutting the raw sheets before feeding them into the massive fabricators. At the other end of the shipyards, several modules appeared mostly completed, although they were shaped differently than Trident's previous architecture. For one thing, each was larger. For another, each also appeared to have an engine array. But the window that had her riveted was from Yard 3. The beginnings of a new ship, its partially constructed bow, at least 3 times the size of an S&R class, peeked out from the yard. The bow was less blocky, more aerodynamic. Rows of cubes, much like the ones she and Dickerson had seen, spread apart to cover the bow almost like a plow, thin cables tying them together. She had an idea what the cubes were for, but no clue what the ship would look like when it was finished. It might be as large as Mira had been. What the void is that? She said and pointed at the Yard 3 window. Our ditch ship, Talby said. Things go too far downhill, we get out of here and never look back. Dickerson cringed. That close to the edge? Yes, we are, Dunn said. If you look at Yard 4, it's making new support craft and a successor to the S&R class, sans sentience. What? Dickerson said. No SI? No SI, Dunn said. Not unless they receive an invitation and agree. We have no idea what their terms might be for that particular bargain, nor do we have any idea if we'd even want one aboard unless forced, let alone many. Many? Dickerson asked. Collective, remember? Kelly said. Dickerson looked embarrassed, and Kelly flashed him a grin. Right, Dunn said. You get one, you get them all. At least that's how I think it works. How it really works? He shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. How are we going to get enough crew for all of this? Talby and Dunn glanced at one another before Dunn sighed. Some will be completely crewed by the collective. Others will end up being hybrid, and the SIs that inhabit them will operate as crew in addition to humans. However, the SIs have agreed to surrender control of any ship systems that might endanger humans. That includes things like life support and etc. Those systems will only be controlled by humans, period. Well, that's a relief, Dickerson said, his voice lower than normal and his eyes glaring over Dunn's shoulder. Or maybe at Dunn himself. How would we know? How will we know? We could only trust ships we design and build ourselves, she said. I mean, by humans. A grin lit Dunn's face. Or someone that has humanity's best interests in mind. What do you mean by that? Kelly asked. It's complicated, Dunn said. For now, you'll have to trust me. He said nothing for a moment, as if he were waiting for them to break the silence. When they didn't, he sucked in a deep breath. That's all for the good news. Oh, shit, Dickerson muttered. What's the bad news? We lost all of Blue Company, except for 2 Marines. Private Copenhagen will be in a coma for a month. We hope that's the outside estimate, but we really don't know. Kelly saw Dickerson's lip quiver. Suddenly she knew, too. Carb didn't make it, did she? Dickerson said. The words came out haltingly and each tighter than the one before. I'm sorry, Dunn said. We also lost Gunny. Dickerson wiped at his eyes and stared down at where his legs should have been. Kelly's eyes stung and her lungs heaved a few times. She was wiping her own tears away a moment later and doing her best not to sob. Dunn and Talby waited, still and silent. "Anyone else?" Kelly asked when she had herself under control. "Thankfully, no," Talby said. "Not that we had all that many to begin with," he sighed. "It's finished. Don't dwell on it." "With all due respect," Dickerson said, his fist clenched, "go fuck yourself." Talby merely nodded at the remark. "Remember that anger," he said softly, "but point it in the right direction." Dickerson blinked a few times before dropping his stare. "Sir," Kelly asked Dunn, "did we fight and die for nothing?" The commander of Trident Station didn't answer. Talby cleared his throat. "This is your private suite until you're cleared for duty. Assuming, of course, you intend to join up?" Dickerson and Kelly traded a glance. She saw in his eyes what she was thinking. They didn't really have a choice.